Welcome to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise 25 Media. We feature top founders, executives, and business leaders from all over the world.
Chad Franzen here, co-host for this show where we feature top restaurateurs, investors, and business leaders. This is part of our SpotOn series. SpotOn has the best-in-class payment platform for retail, and they have a flagship solution called SpotOn Restaurant, where they combine marketing, software, and payments all in one. They have served everyone from larger chains like Dairy Queen and Subway to small mom and pop restaurants. To learn more, go to spoton.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. We help B2B businesses to get ROI, clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships through Done For You podcasts. If you have a B2B business and want to build great relationships with clients, referral partners, and thought leaders in your space, there's no better way to do it than through podcasts and content marketing. To learn more, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. My guest today is David Steele, Executive Chairman of Flour Plus Water Hospitality Group and the Managing Partner of Great Gold Hospitality Group. He's also founder and managing partner of One Wealth Advisors. David is a multifaceted entrepreneur who seamlessly blends his financial acumen and with his passion for the culinary world. He co-founded Flour Plus Water in 2009, and it has become a cornerstone of San Francisco's culinary scene, celebrated for its handcrafted pasta and commitment to community impact. With a background in finance, David blends business acumen with creativity, leading multiple. With creativity, he leads multiple acclaimed restaurants, including Flour Plus Water Pasta Shop, and Penny Roma. He is also a supporter of local arts and cultural organizations, showcasing his diverse interests beyond the restaurant industry. David, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm great, and my pleasure. Happy to be here.
Hey, so tell me, how did you kind of get started in the restaurant industry?
Oh, man, I grew up poor. Got the first job I could get the day they allowed me to get a job at 16 as a dishwasher. My family grew up in the Bronx. We're Jewish, but my family grew up in the Bronx amongst a lot of Italian Americans. And I was raised in South Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia, with a bunch of Italian Americans. And so I related way more to Italian American food, which is distinguished from Italian food, than I do Jewish food or anything of the like. And my family was food obsessed, and I was very excited to become a dishwasher, quickly became a prep cook, and then saw the front of the house people making more money and working half the hours. So moved to the front of the house and worked my way up from busboy to server to captain in a fancy restaurant to ultimately general manager, all through high school and college. Really wanted to open a restaurant, but saw a bunch of artists who I instinctively sensed didn't really know how to run businesses. And that's who I worked for all my years in the restaurant business. So I started a financial planning practice in 1991 out of college because I was confident that could give me some financial security. Did nothing but that for 15 years. Built that up with my brother as my business partner, actually. And I went to my brother and I said, Jonathan, who, by the way, was a chef in college as well. And I said, I got to go part-time, man. I got to go scratch this itch and open a restaurant. I wrote the business plan for Flour and Water. Had to sell my apartment to come up with half the capital because I was raising money from investors in 2008, which was the middle of the credit crisis. Nobody would give never before restaurateur investment capital. So I had to put up most of it myself. And the first restaurant we opened had lines around the block the day we opened for some reason. I think we got lucky, but we've had lines around the block every day since 16 years later. After that first restaurant succeeded, I went to my partners that I started the company with, who, by the way, I owe a lot more credit to our success than myself, to be blunt. But I went to them and said, I think we have a chance to build a company here. I have a day job. I'm not going to start working full time with this company, but I think I have ideas around how we can turn this into a company. Fast forward, we have 5 restaurants, 2 more opening this year, and a consumer packaged goods business called Flour and Water Foods with dried pasta, frozen pizza coming. And I'm executive chairman. My chef founding partner, Tom McNaughton, was 24 when I hired him. And he's now the CEO at the ripe old age. I think he's 40 now, and he's crushing it at running that company. So yeah, so that's how I got to this place in time. Not to mention Great Gold Hospitality Group, which we can talk about later.
Sure. Yeah, that's amazing. So, do you think that your background in finance has given you a kind of an advantage in being successful in the restaurant industry?
I don't want to be critical of anybody in the restaurant industry. It's the hardest working group of people I've ever seen. But I do, an observation I have is what I'll call relationship with capital, understanding how capital works,
Mhm.
understanding the symbiosis between outside investors who have to put their capital somewhere and operators who have ideas and operational capabilities. The importance of what you invest in CapEx and what you expect in return for cash flow from that investment, and always thinking that way. This is something I have rarely seen from restaurant people. And I do think it gives us an advantage. When we began the company, I said, I think there ideally is a healthy tension between business principles, understanding how capital works, and artisanship, right? And without artisanship, you've got Applebee's. No offense to Applebee's, but I don't want to eat there. And they're very fiscally responsible, I'm sure, but it's not inspiring. On the other hand, you've got all these artistic endeavors, seemingly purely artistic endeavors that are probably not all that healthy financially. So I think, yeah, I think it really has given us a bit of an advantage.
How did you kind of come up with your vision for, I'm sorry, I was calling it flour plus water. How did you kind of come up with your vision for flour and water?
Yeah, the plus sign, nobody was doing that back then except for architectural firms. And our graphic designer we worked with put it there and we're like, yes. And we've totally leaned into that plus sign. So it's a little bit confusing, but yeah, it's flour and water. I'm sorry, could you ask that question again?
How did you kind of come up with the vision for that? Was that kind of through
Oh,
your experiences working as a restaurant when you at a restaurant when you were younger?
yeah, I mentioned the Italian American thing. When I
Hmm.
originally wrote the business plan for Flour and Water, to be frank, I didn't understand the extreme differences between Italian American food and food from Italy. I learned since then that the big difference is the ingredients people coming off the boat from Italy had when they landed at Ellis Island were crappy compared to what they had access to in Italy. So they had to create this weird amalgam of the crappy ingredients with their techniques they learned over there. And that's the birth of Italian American food. If anybody knows about red sauce, why are tomatoes stewed and sugar sometimes added? Well, guess what? Because they had crappy tomatoes and they had beautiful tomatoes in Italy. So when I originally wrote the business plan for Flour and Water, and hired Tom, when we first opened, it was very much this sort of intersection of Italian American and food from Italy. Because Tom we forced him to cook to the business plan. And quickly, when we started getting James Beard nominations, little by little, he became more confident and decided he was going to cook the darn food he wanted to cook rightfully. And the Italian American stuff went away. So what we intended that restaurant to be is not what it has become now.
What role does community play in your business philosophy?
Man, I mean, I just can't understand a restaurant that doesn't appreciate community. I mean, uh, to me, restaurants are such a beautiful business in that they are completely dependent. They're involved in the conversation of culture. They keep a physical space alive. They're alive. They're open. If you have a restaurant go out of business, and if you ever see it sit there gone for a couple of years, it really does negatively impact not just aesthetically, but it negatively impacts the energy of the neighborhood. And so I think that um, not to mention the fact that ideally a healthy restaurant is one where people in the community are coming and eating there and enjoying it. So it's to say to even I guess to say it is completely dependent upon community, and I don't think a single restaurant's ever succeeded without somehow incorporating, ideally consciously, but if not, by default, community.
You know, there are a lot of elements, I'm sure, that make a restaurant successful beyond just the quality of the food. How do you kind of define excellence in your restaurant operations?
Well, I greatly believe that the feeling somebody has when they come to a restaurant is it comes from the top. And the first, most obvious, biggest influence somebody gets in terms of how they feel about their experience is the people they interact with, servers, people at the front when they are greeted. In our instance, we have people in the back of the house often running food. And you can feel if they're unhappy. If they're happy, you can feel that too. And so we work our tails off as best we can with the reality of variables sometimes we can't control or that aren't our fault, if you will, to try to have people feel happy.
So what do you when you say it starts from the top, that's kind of where you are. What do you do?
First of all, I'm going to get philosophical, but I think that what we seek in life is to be loved and valued. And what we in the leadership team of my restaurant company, we do the best we can to make the teams beneath us. I hate using the word beneath hierarchically, but beneath us to feel loved and valued, frankly. And there's so many things we do. I can go on and on and on, but we have one-on-ones with everybody in the management team consistently. We have education grants that people can apply for. We have art grants for artists who are employees of the company. Every year, there's serious money that goes towards these things. And there's many other things like that. So it's the number one thing we think of every day. How can we make our team feel happy? And by the way, the food, you would say, well, are you not listening to customers and what they order and what they eat? Here's what I would say. We're empowering our culinary teams to feel valued by being creative. And that then also shows up on the plate to the customer as well. So it really is all about the team and their happiness.
Would you say that philosophy, that core value, caring for people, for lack of a better way of putting it, has been essential to your success?
Absolutely essential. We were nominated for a James Beard Award our first year in business as Flour and Water was a finalist for one of the top, I think 5 best new restaurants in the country. Really cool. We showed up, we were in black ties, me and my founding partners, and we just felt totally out of place. Like, what the heck are we doing here? Anyway, we went to an after party at 11 Madison Park, where Daniel Hume won for best chef in the country that year. And I'm pretty shy. I'm a bit of an introvert when it comes to parties. So I was up in a corner, and some woman who was a pastry chef at a local restaurant that actually won the award that year came up to me and said, "Hey, oh, you're the Flour and Water guy. My brother's opening a spot like yours in London. I don't have a lot of time, but what's the one thing you would say is a key to your success?" I'm like, I can't give you an answer, but if you force me, I'd say, treat your team with love and respect and dignity, care about them. She goes, "Oh, no, I'm serious." I said, "I'm serious too." She goes, No. You have to run a kitchen like the military. You can't, that's not how you do things in restaurants. I said, "Ma'am, I'm going to spend the rest of my career trying to prove you wrong."
Nice. Well, so far so good, I would say. So how? Let's talk about the restaurants underneath the Flour and Water umbrella, I guess. Which was the first one, and what was it called?
Flour and Water was the first one. It
Okay.
was on the corner of 20th and Harrison. We opened that, I think, 16 years ago.
Take me through tell me about the feeling that somebody gets when you walk in there.
Well, what's interesting is when we first opened, it was very kind of hip and cool and loud punk rock music playing and servers, full of earrings and covered in tattoos, wearing whatever they wanted. It was very 2009. All the design was reclaimed wood, and which, honestly, very dated. We didn't have a tasting menu at the time, but we got all these accolades and James Beard nominations, and all of a sudden we found a certain demographic was coming and trying to project a particular experience into what they were having when they were there. So we added a pasta tasting menu, and we found that people ordered it. Every time we raised the price, a higher percentage of people ordered it. We kept raising the price, a higher percentage of people ordered it. And we realized, uh-oh, we're a destination restaurant. Oops, how'd that happen? So we, unlike a lot of our peers, when we got some government support during COVID, we took that capital and renovated the restaurant, and got rid of the reclaimed wood, and made it a much more of an upscale experience. To be frank, it's because our customer told us who they were, what they wanted. So the restaurant you come to now is, I wouldn't call it elevated in that it's deserving of 3 Michelin stars, but I do think it's competing with the 1 Michelin starred restaurants now, which is very different than when we first opened. Servers still wear whatever they want. It's important to us. We create this tension between servers, the team feeling like they're not subservient to customers, that they're peers, they're equals to them. That doesn't detract, hopefully, from hospitality. And that's something that we brought from day one to the experience. They've studied the wine list more now that when we're elevated. They know where every ingredient for every dish comes from. And so that's a bit of a change from when we first opened. So the point I'm making is it's a more refined experience today than it was when we opened. Now, we took a restaurant called Central Kitchen that we had opened 10 years ago that was doing okay. And during COVID, we took that capital that we got from government support, et cetera, and we were able to pivot that concept to a restaurant called Penny Roma, which is part of our portfolio. And that very much feels like Flour and Water when we first opened. And so we were able to still have it both ways, if you will.
So you have, was that the second one as part of the group?
Yeah, well, the second one was Central Kitchen.
Okay.
Which again did okay. I was to this date, it's probably still my favorite restaurant we've ever opened, but the consumers told us that they liked it, didn't love it. And they love Penny Roma. Penny Roma actually outproduces Flour and Water now, sort of surprisingly. Yeah.
Is Flour and Water Pasta Shop then? Is that a different one?
The Flour and Water Pasta Shop is connected to Penny Roma. It's in the front of Penny Roma. It's a deli by day where we do sandwiches. And frankly, it's not a super successful business from that perspective. We really keep it open. You mentioned before about community. We have it as a daytime operation open with like a deli, like an Italian deli, for the purpose of having life in the neighborhood on that corner. It's vibrant. But really what that physical space does is it's where we make our house-made pasta. We have 3 full-time pasta makers making pasta for both Flour and Water and Penny Roma all day and all night. And at night we seat in that space. Penny Roma customers are able to face the pasta making while they're dining. So that space, Flour and Water Pasta Shop, sort of serves a couple of purposes. By day, an Italian deli and a pasta factory. By night, a pasta factory and seating for Penny Roma.
Very nice. What about Flour and Water Pizzeria?
Yeah, that's the concept we're attempting to scale. It's the first one is in North Beach. We took over an iconic space, a restaurant that was there for, I think, 25 years called Rose Pistola, which is, in my opinion, one of the best restaurants that's ever existed in San Francisco. It was there for 25 years. We were honored to be able to take over that space and put Flour and Water Pizzeria there as our flagship. And our plan is to open, I had mentioned earlier, we're opening 2 more restaurants this year. And those are Flour and Water Pizza shops that are an offshoot of this pizzeria in North Beach, which is where we make all the dough for what's going to be a bunch of pizza shops around the Bay Area. And if this hub and spoke model works, we're going to take that model to other geographic areas with a hub and spoke model with a big sort of commissary-like location for pizzerias and then a bunch of pizza shops that surround it.
And then I think you have one more called Trick Dog.
Trick Dog's our bar. We really wanted a bar in the neighborhood where Penny Roma and Flour and Water are, but we know we're not bar people. And so we partnered with an amazing team called the Bon Vivants, led by a guy named Josh Harris. And we're partners in that project. But if you Google it, you won't see the Flour and Water team's name very often. You'll see the Bon Vivants connected with Trick Dog because they really do all the creativity. And we're behind the scenes doing sort of HR and the bookkeeping and IT and all the kind of boring stuff for them.
What are you most proud of regarding the Flour and Water brand?
What it stands for in terms of how it treats people. I mean, my partner often talks about integrity. We launched four SKUs of dried pasta as our first consumer packaged goods product. It took us forever to get this out because my chef partners their standards are so ridiculously high. It just took forever to find a co-packer that was going to make the pasta to our standards. We are launching frozen pizza as our second consumer packaged goods product. We couldn't find a single co-packer in the United States that could make the frozen pizza to our standards. So we built a mini manufacturing facility in the basement of our North Beach Pizzeria location. And that's all about integrity. We probably could have sold lots of dried pasta and frozen pizza in a more efficient way, but it's how we treat people and the integrity of our product. That's what I'm most proud of.
Was there ever a time with Flour and Water where you thought maybe this may not work out, like you were facing tremendous challenges, or because of your background in finance and in your earlier restaurant experience that you just kind of had a good feel for everything?
We've had one restaurant fail, a Spanish restaurant we opened called Ache. That was a failure. But importantly, it didn't fail before Flour and Water was radically successful. And Flour and Water gave us a foundation financially to open Central Kitchen and Trick Dog. Trick Dog was a wild success. Central Kitchen was a moderate success. But this created a foundation of team members, of capital, to then have a failure. I will tell you, if Flour and Water was the first one and it failed, I'm not sure I would have had the confidence to stick it out to do a second one. Whereas having the first one succeed radically and then the Trick Dog succeed and then Central Kitchen at least survive and do okay, all of a sudden we now had a portfolio of things that we could have a failure and it be okay. So I just think we got lucky that the first one won so big.
So how did your affiliation with Great Gold Hospitality Group come about?
Thank you for asking. I live in the Lake Tahoe area part-time, a town called Truckee. And I really wanted to improve the dining scene. I'm talking carefully here because I don't want people to be offended in Truckee, but I don't love the dining scene here. So I'm one of those people that complains about stuff, but then does something about it. And so I'm for efficiency in this story, I'm going to leave some parts out, but I went to a chef of ours at Flour and Water, and we were working on another project together, but I struck this deal to open Great Gold up in Truckee. He agreed to move up and we opened it. I had offered that restaurant to be part of Flour and Water Hospitality Group to my team members there, but Chef Tom, who's now the CEO of Flour and Water, said, you know what, go do that with Chef Brandon as a side project. We really want to focus on the Flour and Water brand. Thank you for offering it, but have it be like a side hustle. Because remember, I have my financial planning practice I still run. And so I opened that with Brandon, and it was radically successful. I mean, it's been just a wild success. And so he and I then opened a second restaurant up here called Tangerine Bistro. And those two restaurants are part of Great Gold Hospitality Group. They're both in Truckee, California. And my guess is we're going to probably open more together as well in the future.
What made that first one so successful?
My take is the food for San Francisco is probably somewhere between an A and an A minus. New York, it's somewhere between an A and an A minus. In Truckee, I think it's an A plus 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 plus. It's just there's no, the thing about Truckee is my assessment is that the majority of the people that work in restaurants up here, food and wine is not their primary passion. When you go to mountain towns, it's living in the mountain that is your primary passion. Food and wine is a distant second, if not fifth. And hiring people that are passionate about food and wine is absolutely critical to having greatness. And so I mentioned we're an A to A minus in San Francisco or New York. We'd be an A plus in San Francisco, New York, if we had, frankly, teams that were maybe a little bit more passionate about food and wine. So we have to make sure, we have to keep what our teams are capable of in mind when we conceptualize and curate the offerings at these restaurants up here. And I think that because we brought, bluntly, I brought Chef Brandon up, and then we brought Chef Timmy up to be our executive chef on the team also. We brought them from San Francisco where they had world-class training. So they have the passion, but they get frustrated often with a team that works for them that doesn't have the passion. So it's a long answer. They're successful because I think that, frankly, they're better than most everything else, but they're still not even as good as we would like them to be if we can get them there.
Do you take a different approach in a place like Truckee for when creating a vibe than you might in New York or in San Francisco? Or do you know that those vibes work there, so Truckee, it'll work in Truckee as well?
Well, I like the question, vibe. No, I think they're different vibes. There's a lot of families in Truckee, and so you have to have spaces that feel appropriate. In San Francisco, we can have dark lights, lots of candles, very loud music. Maybe up here in Truckee, and I'm here right now, by the way, up here, I'm in Truckee as we speak. I think it's a little bit, you have to make sure you thread the needle between what kind of hip, cool people maybe we think they want, and also families.
I know that local arts and cultural organizations are important to you. How do you go about supporting those types of things?
Well, I've been on 3 arts organizations over the last 20-something years. I give a decent percentage of my salary each year towards arts nonprofit organizations. So by being on the board and by, frankly, giving money is how I support them. Yeah, I was on the board of a group called Arts Band for 10 years, or maybe more, and they created the concept of artist open studios. I was on the board of the New York Foundation for Artists, which creates business plan curriculums for artists who don't understand how to turn their careers into like a business. And I just left the board of a playwright incubator called Playground, which I was on the board of for 10 years as well.
Okay. I have one more question for you, but first, just tell me how people can find out more information about everything that you have going on, whether it's with Flour and Water or anything else.
You know, I have a little silly website I did for myself. It's davidsteele.xyz, DAVIDSTEELE.xyz. And I often update that with the new stuff I'm working on. And so that's probably the best way to at least initially check out what I'm doing. Okay,
great. So my last question, normally I ask, like, if you were at your restaurant as a customer, what would your go-to item be? But since you're affiliated with so many restaurants, let's say they were all lined up next door to each other and you were out for a bite to eat, what would your go-to place / item be?
My go-to place would be Penny Roma. If I had to pick one restaurant, it'd be Penny Roma in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And chefs Tom and Ryan, who are my partners in that company, they really gave me a gift when we conceptualized that restaurant. I was very involved in structuring that menu, and I'm very grateful for them allowing me to have a say in that. And there's an albacore tuna tartare on that menu. The menus at our restaurants change daily, like all the time. There's a couple things that never leave the menus of certain restaurants, and that's one that I think will never leave the menu of Penny Roma. So if you made me choose, if you forced me to answer, that's my answer.
Okay, very nice. Hey, David, it's been really great to talk to you. I really appreciate your time and all your insights and you sharing your stories with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So long, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise 25. Visit rise25.com to check out more episodes of the show and to learn more about how you can start your own podcast.